The skyscraper gleamed in the morning light, its glass walls reflecting a city built on ambition and pride. At the very top floor sat Vivian Hale, billionaire CEO of Hale Dynamics, the kind of woman whose name made people sit straighter when they heard it. She was brilliant, successful, and feared, and she liked it that way. That morning her computer froze right in the middle of a presentation with investors watching. She tapped the screen. Frustration rising, her assistant rushed in, apologetic. "Ma'am, the IT team says they're stuck in another meeting." She sighed loudly. "Wonderful, so I'm supposed to stare at a blank screen and pretend it's strategy." Then her eyes landed on the janitor, quietly mopping near the door, a hint of amusement. "Curling in her tone, you there," she said. Snapping her fingers, "Care to fix my computer while you're polishing floors?" Her team chuckled, unsure if it was a test or a joke. The janitor looked up, calm and steady. His name tag read Eli without a word. He placed his mop aside and walked over his grey uniform. Spotless, his hands rough but confident. He said softly, "I can take a look, ma'am." Vivian smirked. "Be my guest, though, I'm sure this isn't in your cleaning manual." He sat at her desk. His movements, precise and silent as he began typing lines of code, filled the screen so fast the room fell quiet. Vivian frowned, realizing he wasn't guessing. He knew exactly what he was doing. Within minutes, the frozen system flickered back to life, every file, restored, every program running smoother than before. Her investors clapped politely. Impressed, one of them muttered under his breath, "That's one talented janitor." Eli stood slowly, meeting Vivian's gaze for the first time. "Ma'am, your system had a corrupted registry. It should work fine now." She blinked once, twice. "You fixed it?" He nodded. "I used to build computers before this job." She stared at him, speechless, as he picked up his mop again. Before walking out, he said quietly, "Next time, don't underestimate someone who knows how to clean up a real mess." The boardroom was silent long after Eli left. Even the hum of the projector seemed to fade into nothing. Vivian sat still, her pride stinging, but her curiosity louder than her ego. She'd seen hundreds of technicians in her life, but none had moved like that. Every keystroke of his had purpose and precision, as if he had written the code himself. Her investors whispered among themselves, and one of them chuckled softly. "Maybe you should hire him as your head of IT." She forced a thin smile, dismissing the room, but the thought stuck. That afternoon, she asked her assistant to pull up Eli's file. The woman returned a few minutes later, holding a clipboard. Hesitantly, "His full name is Elijah Brooks, ma'am. He joined 3 months ago on a temporary contract building maintenance. Before that, he worked for a company called Lexon Technologies." Vivian's pen stopped mid-air. Lexon. She knew that name. It was one of her old rivals, the one that collapsed 5 years ago after a major data breach. She frowned, scanning the report, one line standing out: former chief systems engineer. She leaned back in her chair, whispering to herself, he was an engineer. Later that evening, she found him, in the maintenance hallway, coiling cables neatly, as if every motion mattered. She walked closer, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. He didn't turn around, just said without looking, "I figured you'd come." Vivian raised an eyebrow, bold. "Assumption." He smiled faintly. "Not really. People don't like being reminded they were wrong." She folded her arms. "You were their chief engineer, weren't you? Lexon Technologies." He nodded. "I was before the company imploded. I took the blame to protect the team." She studied him for a moment. "You went from designing systems to cleaning floors." He shrugged. "Sometimes peace is worth more than pride." Something about his answer disarmed her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was grounding, finally. She said, "I'm offering you a new job. You don't belong down here." He looked up, meeting her eyes, and said calmly, "Maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. The world looks different from the ground. You should try seeing it sometime, for the first time." In years, Vivian didn't know what to say. The next morning, Vivian couldn't concentrate on anything she was supposed to. Her meetings blurred into background noise. Her mind kept drifting back to the janitor who once designed systems for $1 billion company. She replayed his words over and over. "The world looks different from the ground." That sentence hit her harder than any boardroom argument ever had. By noon, she found herself walking to the maintenance floor again, this time without her assistant or her pride. Eli was fixing a ceiling light, humming softly. She waited until he climbed down the ladder before speaking. "You said peace is worth more than pride," she began. "But what about purpose?" He turned to her, a small smile crossing his face sometimes. "They're the same thing," she frowned, confused how. So he set down his tools and said softly, "Fixing something isn't always about status. Sometimes it's about seeing the result of your work every day and knowing it matters even if no one claps." Vivian looked at him quietly. She'd spent her whole career chasing applause profits awards, and yet lately none of it had felt like enough. She asked him, "Then, why did you help me that day? You could have stayed silent." He chuckled lightly because people who think they're above fixing things usually need it the most. She blinked, half offended, half amused. "You think I needed fixing?" He smiled calmly. "I think you needed reminding." She leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "Maybe you're right. I built this company to prove I could do it better than anyone else, but lately it feels like I'm losing the people part of it." He nodded. "Because you're chasing success, not significance." The words stayed with her that night. She couldn't sleep. So she went back to her office, powered up her laptop, and started rewriting a new company policy, one focused on people over numbers. The next morning she gathered her team and announced a new initiative, employee-driven innovation open to everyone. Even janitors, the room murmured in surprise. She saw Eli in the back, leaning on his mop with a faint smile, as if he already knew she would do it. When the meeting ended, she walked up to him quietly. "This wasn't for show," she said. He nodded. "I know. Change doesn't happen from speeches. It happens when people decide to listen." Weeks passed and Hale Dynamics began to change. The glass walls that once echoed with pressure and fear now carried laughter and ideas. Vivian opened a new department, called Ground Innovations, where employees from every level could pitch improvements to the company, and the first person she asked to lead it was Eli. He refused twice, but she insisted, until finally he agreed on one condition: no titles, just teamwork. She smiled for the first time in a long time. Someone had reminded her what leadership was meant to feel like. Under Eli's guidance, the company thrived. Ideas flowed from every corner. The janitors, the interns, even the receptionists everyone had. A voice one afternoon, Vivian walked past a meeting room and stopped at the door, watching him explain a new security prototype to the engineers. His sleeves rolled up his hands, moving as he spoke, with quiet confidence. The team listened. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She realized in that moment he wasn't just fixing systems, he was fixing people, including her. After the meeting, she walked in saying softly, "You could have been anywhere." Eli smiled. Maybe, but nowhere would have meant as much. She looked at him curiously. "Why here, then?" he replied. "Because this time the work matters more than the credit, and you let that happen." She nodded quietly, feeling something rare. Pride without ego. That evening she stood beside him, on the balcony overlooking the city. The same skyline that once made her feel untouchable now felt like a lesson. She said softly, "I used to think power was the ability to control everything." He smiled, and now she looked at him with a small laugh. "Now I know it's the courage to admit when you're wrong." He nodded, gazing at the lights below. "Sometimes the best leaders learn from the ones they overlook." She turned to him, meeting his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me." He shook his head. "I just fixed a computer you fixed yourself." As the night wind brushed past them, the city lights flickered like distant stars, and Vivian felt a peace she hadn't known since the day she built her empire. For the first time, she wasn't chasing more. She was simply grateful to have learned enough. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.